with the title Rethink Agile, Revisiting the Manifesto, Unveiling the Roadblocks to True Agility. So first of all, welcome to our webinar. Thank you so much for your time to be here. So today is 23rd of April, and we have our speaker of the day, Mr. Preet, professional Scrum trainer and Agile coach. Stay tuned with us till the end because we have a Q&A session at the end of our webinar. So if you have any questions or any doubts, feel free to share with us. Moving on with my next slide. So just a quick recap. This is our agenda for the day. So our speaker is going to talk on the Agile journey so far, celebrating success, acknowledging challenges, and also recognizing areas for improvement. And also will examine on the Agile Manifesto principles in the context of today's challenges. Also, identifying the common hurdles that organizations have grappled with despite years of Agile adoption and what's preventing the realization of Agile's full potential. And finally, discussing the practical strategies and approaches to overcome roadblocks and revitalize Agile transformations and ensure sustained value delivery. So this is our agenda for today.
Welcome to today's conversation around the Agile Manifesto. And why is it that still a lot of organization, despite close to 22 years of Agile being practiced, why are we still struggling to take it forward? Yeah, I'm just going to go do my screen share. I do have a slide deck that I have prepared, and here we go. So we're going to talk. So the talk, as Renuka mentioned, we are going to talk about. We are going to rethink about the Agile, right? We are kind of revisiting the manifesto itself, so that kind of helps us to understand what roadblocks are we running into, and how probably could we overcome this particular challenges that we see. Let's start at the beginning. So when I say let's start at the beginning, we really need to look forward to why did Agile even come into place, right? So what created or what was the need for agility in the first place? Yeah. So if you think back in history, right, when we talk about waterfall as an approach, as we are all aware, actually came into being during the industrial era. Right? It actually happened during the industrial era. And when you talk about industrial era, right, we were talking about mass manufacturing. We set up a lot of factories. Transport was important. Supply chain was important, right? So, but the kind of work that we were doing at that particular point in time was mostly repeatable and predictable kind of a job, right? You're manufacturing a car. You identify what are the requirements for the car. You fix the design. Then it's all about creating as many cars as possible from the fixed design that we have in hand, right? The more cars we make, the more cars we sell, the more cars we sell, the more revenue we make, right? So this was the particular idea. So it's about repeating the same process of building the car based on the same design again and again and again and again, right? So the kind of work was repeatable. You're repeating the exact same steps again and again for creating different instances of the car. So this is where it was. So now when we were doing this, there was definitely a need for a way of managing this kind of work, right? So this is when we came up with this concept of scientific management, right? We started talking about scientific management. So what is scientific management? Like it's the theory of management where the main objective was improving the economic efficiency, especially labor productivity. Right? So if you're doing the same things again and again, you're not really dependent on people. So you could have different people coming in at different points in time, doing some work and then moving out, right? So scientific management as an approach was purely focused on, how do you increase the labor productivity, which can then result in better economic outcomes. Yeah. And when was this put in place? It was the earliest attempt of applying science to the process for management, right? It was primarily focused in the US, and it came up sometime during the 1880s and the 1890s. And as we know, since the focus was mainly manufacturing, this was primarily meant for manufacturing industries. Okay. Great. So all these things were fine. It is really helpful. Even today, if you think about it, right, scientific management, if you're doing actually a repeatable, predictable job, it's still good stuff to actually have with you on your side, right? So when you apply this, what was the result? The result was what we call as a stable functional hierarchy, which is purely focused on growing a successful, sustainable business, right? So what do you mean by that, right? So you have the expert sitting right at the top, right? The person who knows everything about the work that needs to be done, possibly a person who has been doing the work for a long time and knows the inside out of how the work gets done, right? So you have the expert up here, and then you keep giving them people, right? You create teams for under them, and the people who are doing the work is at the ground level, and people who are coordinating, managing, and doing all of those aspects is sitting right on top there, right? So this is what generally was the result of applying scientific management, right? This was good. This was literally delivering, right, profits, right, for enduring those market conditions. Right? There is no doubt that a hierarchical setup with the expert sitting on top, helping people, the semi-skilled or the unskilled labor, get the job done or following a standard operating procedure is still a great way if you're doing a repeatable, predictable job. Yeah, so this happens. So then all was going well till the digital age happened, right? The digital age came into being, right? So now the products were not just about manufacturing, just about the hardware component part of it, but rather we started talking about digitizing, right? Every product offering that we talk about today, is not just about the hardware component, but there is more to it, right? And with the revolution of this technology coming in, what happened? The world started moving fast, right? The rate at which the change that we see today, be it in terms of processing speed, be it in terms of storage, or be it in terms of the communication efficiency, right? It is completely different from what it was at that point, right? So what happened because of all of these things? Now, if you really start thinking about the impact, right? So in the digital age that we are talking about today, right? Today we have organizations, right? This is a couple of years old data because I didn't have the 2024 data. This is the 2022 data, right? So when you 2023 data, sorry, when you look at it, right, you actually have organizations like say Apple, Microsoft, or Saudi Aramco, right, whose revenue or the market capitalization of these organizations can be compared to the GDP of organizations. So if you really look at it in terms of GDP, and if you were to compare the market cap, Apple is the 8th biggest economy in the world, much bigger than many countries in the world, right? Similarly, Microsoft comes at about the 10th position, right? Saudi Aramco comes at the 11th position. So as you can see, organizations are so big that the revenues are so big, the rate of change that they are bringing in is disruptive, right? To an extent, and are we talking only about the software companies right now? Not necessarily, right? The BMW Group CEO is expecting that more than half of its research and development staff will be software developers, right? Today, the market cap of Tesla is, I think this is continuously changing. So please forgive me if this is not exactly what it is today. So they are about 900 billion market capital, whereas Ford, which actually brought in the revolution of cars, is only about 60 billion market cap, right? Apple is now the biggest watchmaker in the world when Apple is not even a watch manufacturing company, right? They're a technology company. So as you can see, the revolution and the disruptions is driven by the digital world. Yeah. So no harm in it. This is a good thing. Revolutions or this kind of disruptions are good because it's actually making our lives easier, right? But it also comes with a challenge. What was the problem? The complexity is increasing exponentially, right? So the kind of products that we are using, the kind of technologies that we are using today is a lot more complex, right? Compare the cars that might have been driven by our parents, right? A simple carburetor, or if you look at the examples of, like, say, the Jeeps that the American companies created, you could literally dismantle and put back the entire car probably in few hours. But the car that you drive today, right? The amount of complexity that the car has today, even though the intent is to go from point A to point B, today, no, you have no intelligence built into your car which takes care of your safety, right? Not easy to do it. So the complexity of the solutions that we are building is also increasing exponentially, right? You never needed a computer to fix a car maybe 10 or 12 years ago. But today, when you take your car to the service, the first thing that they need to do is they need to plug it to a computer to figure out what could have possibly gone wrong, right? Things are changing. It basically means a mechanic, who just learned how to use the toolkits, the tool sets, right, is not generally capable of fixing a car anymore, right? You need to have some kind of a computer literacy as well, right? So things are changing. The structures and the cultures that we have built earlier is no longer able to stay on up to speed with the changes in the technology, right? So because of all of this, things that because we are getting into work which is non-repeatable and unpredictable, right? You needed a lot of intelligence to be put into place. That is when we realized the work that we do or the technology that we are dealing with is not just for the unskilled or the semi-skilled. You literally were talking about knowledge workers, right? As simple as any simple car that you take. Now we have advanced driver assistance systems, right, which can sense a car in the front slowing down rather quickly, or there's a car behind you which is accelerating towards you. It is capable of telling you about a potential problem, and in cases that you're not responding to it, the cars can take control, right? Do you think a traditional hierarchical way of doing it is going to cut it? No. It doesn't work that way, right? You need to have collision avoidance system. You need to have the lane maintenance system. All of these things are very complex and needs advanced thinking and support. Yeah. So this is when people started experimenting and saying, how do we deal with this level of complexity? What was the outcome? The agile ways of working, right? So the intention, in 2001, when the Agile Manifesto was signed, right, the intent was very clear, right? We really needed to uncover better ways of developing software by doing it, right, and helping others to do it, right? But the idea was the waterfall approach, which was meant for manufacturing, does not cut it in today's investment. So what did they do? They about 17 of these software development leaders, right, got together in 2001, and most of the reason I'm calling them the leaders are these were people who had actually come up with different approaches of dealing with software, right? So we had the two co-creators of Scrum, Ken Schwaber and Jeff Sutherland attending it. We had the extreme programming folks in there, right? We had people who came up with adaptive software development. All these people who have experimented it and who have found success in ways of dealing with this level of complexity came together to help the entire IT industry, right? So that's where the Agile Manifesto came into being, right? So what does the manifesto contain? Manifesto contains 4 values and 12 principles, right? We're talking about the 4 values and the 12 principles in Agile Manifesto, right? So today the focus is primarily on principles because we are talking about doing Agile, right? It's about what are we doing today which may not be helpful and how do we overcome them, right? But still, since the values are important, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a little over a minute to quickly introduce you to the 4 values, not by me speaking it, but I'm showing you a small video clip which kind of helps you to understand what the 4 values are. I'm sure all of you are aware of it, but I just wanted you guys to know just a quick recollect of what these 4 values means. Yeah, here we go.
So it was 2001, and a group of software visionaries gathered at a ski resort to share their experiences and figure out why so many software projects were failing. This wasn't just about documenting best practices. They knew the industry required a fundamental shift in values, and so the Agile Manifesto was born. A declaration of 4 bold value statements that became the basis of a new approach to software development and would change the industry forever. But what were those 4 values, and why should you care? Let's take a look. But first, it is important to point out that the Agile Manifesto ends by noting that all of the things mentioned are important, just that some things must be prioritized over others. Okay, here we go. Number 1, individuals and interactions over processes and tools. This doesn't mean throw processes and tools out the window. It simply means that a good face-to-face chat should trump rigid workflows and impersonal forms of communication. Number 2, working software over comprehensive documentation. Makes sense, right? But traditional software development often produced extensive documentation before a program was released for initial testing. Some documentation is good, but wouldn't it be better to have the program than a book describing it? Number 3, customer collaboration over contract negotiation. Sure, you'll want to start out with some initial guidelines, but instead of locking customers in a cage by defining the exact details of the project before it starts, teams and customers should collaborate to find the best solutions. And finally, number 4, responding to change over following a plan. Nothing ever goes entirely according to plan. So instead of sticking with something that isn't working, it's much more effective to make adjustments as your situation changes. Following the values isn't always easy, but when you build them into your team's processes, customers notice, and the payoff is huge. Which of the Agile values do you think is the most important?
So this was a quick recap of the 4 values. I wouldn't take the last question seriously, which is which of the values is more important. I think all values are equally important. You might focus on one value more at any given point in time than the others, but it is never to say that no, the others are not really important, right? So with that context being said, let's take a look at the 12 principles that we have, right? The first principle, right? It actually says, our highest priority is to satisfy the customer through early and continuous delivery of valuable software, right? So if we have learned one thing when we were doing waterfall is the fact that, right, your market does not care about the plans that you have made. Your market or your competitors do not care about, what progress of your development are you in. It will keep changing, right? The customer's expectation, the customer's needs will keep changing. So what do? So instead of waiting for months to release a complete software product, we are looking at delivering small, usable parts early, right? Why is this important? This is important because this gives us feedback sooner, right? So if you're delivering, developing and delivering more features or user stories or whatever you call it regularly, right? This way, we are getting faster feedback. So we are able to improve and adjust based on the customer feedback. Because let me honestly ask you a question. How many times have you worked in a software project where when you delivered the product to the customer's response was, "Thank you so much. This is exactly what we wanted." How many times have you encountered that? Right? I know it's a rhetoric question, but then think about it, right? And the fact that we have been again doing the exact same thing again and again and again, assuming things going to change, right? We are spending lots of time in planning. We come up with comprehensive requirements document, but still, right? The customer is never happy at the end, right? So this is the reason why you need to incorporate faster feedback, right? So I'm just taking the example of Scrum because it's the most popular framework across the world. So now let's say, if you're executing a sprint, let's say you're executing a sprint, and let's say your developers constitutes of 5 programmers and 3 testers. Yeah, there are 5 programmers and 3 testers as your developers. And in the sprint planning, let's assume you have brought in 5 backlog items or user stories or whatever you call your work item, right? You brought it into your sprint backlog, right? You brought it into the sprint backlog. Now, how does this 8 people, right? The 5 programmers and 3 testers, how do they work on this particular 5 backlog items that you have? If you really look at many of the Scrum teams, what happens? You have 5 programmers. Each of the programmer will pick one of the backlog item each, and they'll start working on it, right? And when I say, "Are you Agile?" they say, "Yeah, of course Agile, because when the coders are writing the code, my testers are writing the test cases." That is not Agile. That is still waterfall. That is still 100% waterfall, because you had 5 items in the backlog, which were prioritized. You know what was priority 1, you know what was priority 2, what was priority 5. And if you're working on priority 1 and priority 5 at the same time, this is exactly what we did in waterfall. We never prioritized anything. We took all the requirements and we considered all of them equal, right? Even after claiming that we are doing Scrum, we still go back to the same way of operating in many different cases, right? So then the question then becomes, are we really prioritizing what the customer needs? Right? The customer has given us what they want. We have prioritized those requirements. But then when you execute it, you're going back to the same waterfall. Correct? So now, even though we believe working in 2 weeks is the solution, how correctly are we working is a bigger question that we really need to start thinking about. Majority of the teams, majority might be, making a bold statement. This has been my experience, right? In my experience, majority of us, think about 2 weeks as a sprint, but end up creating a 2-week waterfall. First few days of coding, then last few days of testing, right? So you have development days followed by testing days. And in many of the cases at the end of the sprint, we usually get back to the same state that we are only 80% done. That basically means no releasable increment at all. So, right? Are we really being agile? The answer is no. We are still being waterfall, but in shorter time durations. At best, what you can call your team is a mini waterfall. Right? So you really need to start thinking in terms of, even though we are claiming that we are agile or we are doing Scrum, are we really doing it? Yeah. Similarly, the second manifesto principle says welcoming change requirements even late in development. Right? And agile processes harness change to the customer's competitive advantage. Is this important? Yes, it is very important. Why? Because as we were discussing, market changes and your competitors are not going to wait for you. Right? So the question then I have is you're working on a few items during your sprint. Right? You're working in smaller iterations so that you can live up to this particular principles. Right? So the idea was, at the end of the sprint, you can always go back and reevaluate if there are any new priority items that have come in. If yes, we bring it into our next sprint. Right? Are all teams following this? The quick answer is no, they are not. I'll tell you, there are many teams, as I was saying, since we are still working in 2-week waterfall, there's a concept called a spillover, right? No, the work is not complete in sprint 1. So what do? Even our tools, like say Jira and all of these things, are configured in a way that at the end of that sprint time box, all your undone work moves into the next sprint. Right? Everything is moving into the next sprint. How? Right? If everything is moving, that basically means we are not really bothered about what the customer wants at this particular point in time. Yes, when we started the last sprint, this was the priority items. But what if things have changed in the background? Are we connecting with the customer? Are we telling the customer that, hey, you know what, we didn't finish anything, so there's a possibility of a delay. If there's a possibility of a delay, would you like us to focus on something else than what we are focusing on right now? Are we having these conversations at this point? Right? So another bigger question is, when do you finish each of the backlog items that you have taken in? And since we are working in mini waterfall mode, all the backlog item gets done at the very end of the sprint. Why? Coding days followed by testing days. Until both of these things are done, your backlog item is not done. So in between the sprint, right, if a customer comes and says, hey, you know what? Because of the change in some external aspects, maybe my customer's competitor has come up with a new feature which is disrupting his market. So we have something new that we really need to work on. Now, if everything is in progress, right, it becomes, it's heartbreaking for the developers to say, let's ditch this and let's start moving on. That, even though that's the right thing to do. But if you are focusing on delivering one backlog item after the other based on the prioritization, chances are the time you need to make the switchover is going to be much lesser. Right? But are we doing this? Right? Even though we claim that we are agile, we are doing Scrum to help us be agile, are we really thinking in these lines? Yeah? A question for you to ponder on. Right? Third principle says deliver working software frequently from a couple of weeks to a couple of months. Right? Couple of weeks to a couple of months with a preference to shorter time scale. Why? The idea is early feedback. Right? Customers can see and use the software early on, providing feedback that can be incorporated into our future iterations that we do. Right? And when you get this faster feedback, we are reducing our risk. Right? We're reducing the risk of rework. Right? If you're getting faster feedback, you can course correct ourselves faster. If we course correct ourselves faster, rework comes down. When rework comes down, risk comes down, and the total cost of production is also less. Right? Imagine incorporating a feedback after, let's say, 3 months or 6 months versus incorporating feedback every 2 weeks or every month. Right? You're course correcting yourself faster. right? And actually seeing the progress and getting the user feedback is very much exciting for the development team as well, right? Great. So now we understand this. You are delivering working software frequently. But let me ask you guys a question. In your Scrum teams, when do you do your regression testing? Right? Or if there are any specialized testing, like say if you're from the banking background, right? You need to do, say, security testing, right? If you're mostly from, let's say, an e-commerce or something like that, right? Chances of performance and load testing is important. How often do you do your regression testing or your specialized testing, right? If it is not being done in every sprint, are you actually building working software? No. You are still stuck with tons of unverified code. Probably slightly better than waterfall, because in waterfall you don't test at all, maybe unit testing, right? But here, since the testers are getting involved, there is some aspect of testing, so quality is slightly improved. But are you delivering working software frequently? Scrum also claims the same thing, right? Intent of every sprint is to create a done increment, right? The need or the expectation from every sprint is a usable, valuable increment. Now, when does it become usable and valuable? When it is ready for release. So as your Scrum teams, have you thought about, are we even thinking about working software? Or does working software just mean saying like, okay, we've implemented one user story, that user story seems to be working, let's just demo this user story from a developer machine? Or are you thinking in terms of integrating that user story into your existing code base, regression test done, security test done, and I'm going to put, it's all the things are done in the staging environment, and I'm going to take it for feedback from the staging environment. Which one are you guys doing? Right? If it is not the latter, if you're not doing it from the staging environment with an integrated code, right? With all the regression testing done, and if the customer says, amazing job, can we start using it? And if your answer is no, then this particular principle is not implemented, right? We are far from implementing this particular, right? Getting a feedback from the product owner, great, but not the outcome. Yeah. One big challenge that many organizations are running into, right? Next one says, business people and developers must work together daily throughout the project. Right? This is emphasizing that the business stakeholders, those who define what the software should do or what the product should do, and developers, those who are actually building the product or the software, they need to work closely together. Right? Why? Because developers probably will have questions from an implementation, no matter how late into the implementations. Right? They should definitely have the conversation there. Right? They need the questions should get answered. Right? Business teams might need insights into technical feasibility of requirements so that they can make informed decisions about when to implement PBI or a requirement. Should we implement it now or later? Because the cost of building the software, you definitely need the inputs from the developers. So how often are your product owners and developers, if you're doing Scrum, talking to each other at this level? Right? Are we making decisions together? Right? This is at a higher level. Let's talk about only from an implementation perspective, right? Let's say your teams are doing Scrum really well, and let's say you pulled out a lot of backlog items in your sprint planning. The teams have been working on it, right? The team's working on it, and let's say on day 3, one of the product backlog item has met the definition of done, right? The developers say they are done working on this particular backlog item. Everything is over, right? So once you've finished implementing it, and let's say you're finishing it on the 3rd day, let's say 2-week sprint, so 10 days, 3rd day of the sprint, you finish implementing the backlog item. What do I generally see in the teams? They go on to the next high value item. But my question is, yes, you're done from an implementation standpoint, but do you know if that is what was the expectation from your business stakeholders? No. So ideally, what should have happened? The moment you finish implementing a piece of work, you invite the product owner to review the work that you have accomplished. Even before you think about what to do next, it should be part of the culture or the approach that we have put in place. We think we are done with one backlog item, let's get it reviewed by the product owner. Right? Product owner represents business for us in a Scrum team. Right? Because on the 3rd day, if I finish the highest value item, why should I wait for the end of the sprint to get a feedback? Right? If I get faster feedback, then basically you can also live up to the Second principle expectation of releasing it faster. You don't even have to wait for the end of the sprint to release anything. Get the feedback from the product owner. If everything is okay, release it so that by the time you get to the sprint review, you will have the actual customer feedback, which will help you to decide what to do next. But are we living up to this, right? Are we getting the product owner involved in our day-to-day activities? Are we getting the product owner involved in reviewing the work that we are accomplishing continuously? If not, we are not living up to this principle yet. Yeah. So this is one challenge that I see in many organizations again, right? The next principle talks about, build projects around motivated individuals and give them the environment and support they need and trust them to get the job. Right? Build projects around motivated individuals, which basically means build the team first and bring the project to the teams. Correct? So it's a huge shift from the traditional waterfall way of thinking. In waterfall, project takes the center stage, right? Okay, this is the project that we are doing. This is the most important thing. Now let's look for anybody available who can work on this project. Right? Now, in a traditional project management, people are on the bench or people who are coming out of a particular project. Everybody is brought in and then put together to work on a project. Why? Still waterfall thinking. We are thinking about it as no standard operating procedure and people really do not matter, which is not the case, right? You're talking about knowledge work. So the knowledge of the people are very, very important. So how do you really get to deal with the complexity? By building a team of knowledge workers, closely knit, working together on a product at any given point. But then how are your agile teams or your scrum teams formed, right? In most of the cases that I generally tend to see, right, you have component teams, you have a UI scrum team. Yes, it's cross-functional. Why? Because you have both programmers and testers as part of the UI scrum team. And then you have your API scrum team. Yes, the programmers and testers for the API are part of it. So is it okay? Probably yes, right? But have you thought in terms of, where this thought process comes from is we have existing hierarchies. We have, within the development organization, we have the UI teams, right? We have the API teams. Then we have the middleware, the business logic, data access, data store hierarchies built. So what are we trying to do? Let's retrofit Scrum or any of the frameworks into each of these things. Yeah. So you're retrofitting Scrum into your existing hierarchies. And what did Scrum say? Scrum says, build projects around motivated individuals. So you need to have teams which are able to deliver end-to-end project or at least end-to-end features, right? So did we really think when you are constructing the agile teams, right? Did we start by saying, hey, let's define what is it that we are trying to deliver? Let's look at how we are building value, the proposed value for our customers. Which people from which hierarchy needs to work together in order to deliver this, right? In short, are we thinking in terms of the value stream identification, right? Identifying the systems that needs to be built, identifying people to build the systems, and then bringing them together to form the agile teams, right? Do you actually have teams which are created in a manner that they are able to work among themselves and then deliver value? If not, the second statement comes in, right? Give them the environment and the support that they need. As leaders, this is what is expected of the leaders. Are you creating the right kind of team structures? And within the team structure, just because you have the right team structure does not mean everything is going to work. Right? There are two teams now. There is a lot of need for continuous integration, right? Because at the end, the integrated outcome of all your teams is what we will consider it as a usable, valuable increment. Correct? So have you thought about the tools that needs to be put in place for continuous integration? Have you thought about techniques that we are going to apply so that the code merges and the code reviews are being done across the teams as well? Right? Have you thought about it? Have you implemented any of these things? Or are we still stuck in the traditional way saying, in this particular team, we will do this, and then maybe there is a lead who will review it, and then we will check it in, right? We'll talk to the other team only if there is a dependency that we can. Or are you also thinking in terms of continuous integration of the work done by the multiple teams building the same product? If not, we are still not following this principles, right? You're still not thinking in terms of how the value is getting built and how it needs to get delivered. Yeah. Similarly, when you talk about the most efficient and effective method of conveying information to and within a development team is face-to-face conversation. Why? Face-to-face conversation means clear communication, right? So talking directly reduces the risk of misunderstandings, right? Which generally happens with any kind of written communication, right? And it can have real-time problem solving. Issues can be identified and addressed immediately, correct? So in short, right? And it also helps you to build trust, right? And collaboration with the development. In short, if you do not have face-to-face conversation, the decision making is slow. And any face-to-face conversation is about accelerated decision making, right? So we believe that we are doing it, right? We believe that we are actually having face-to-face conversations. But let me ask you, when you're doing your daily Scrum, right? How many of you are in the same room, or how many of you are actually using video conferencing to have your daily Scrum? A very important event as far as developers are concerned within the teams. Why? Because you're trying to say we committed to the sprint goal, right? And on a daily basis, we are trying to figure out what is the progress of us, right? Because as a team, we committed to the goal. Are we, what is the progress that we have made on, right? In most of the cases these days, I don't even hear teams using the word daily Scrum. They call it Scrum call, daily call. Why? We're using the telephone to do that. On a daily basis, when having a very important conversation like this, if you're not using face-to-face conversations, how does that take us forward, right? That's just one example. Now, when a tester identifies a defect or a bug, right? How is that conveyed to the programmer? Yeah, most probably Jira or any of those tools, right? Write up a defect thing, assign it to the programmer. How difficult is to have a face-to-face conversation? Say, hey, guy, programmer, come over. No, this is something that I wanted to show you before even I log the defect in there. How many conversations does that? Generally, even today, when I see working with many teams, what do I see? The tester logs a defect, programmer closes it immediately saying, works on my machine, or I cannot reproduce this defect on my machine. Now, where is the face-to-face conversation, right? If this is not happening, then it's a challenge, right? You have you're implementing one user story and you have a challenge in there. You realize that you're not going to be able to deliver this in the current sprint timelines. When does the product owner know about it? Is it as soon as the programmers realize it, or is it at the end of the sprint? Right? So are we actually having face-to-face conversations? Right? So if not, if whatever I have listed down, just a few examples, even if that is not happening, then we are not having face-to-face conversations, right? So accelerated decision-making is just not possible, right? Every decision is getting delayed, and and the intent of doing Agile is to figure out where these delays are and remove them. Yeah. So think about it, right? Are we really having face-to-face conversation? Working software is the primary measure of progress. Great, right? What are we measuring? At the end of the sprint, what are we measuring? What are sprint level metrics? Stories planned versus stories delivered. Stories delivered versus stories accepted by the product owner. Velocity. Now, where are we talking about working software in any of these things? Right? Are we talking about working software in any of these things? What are we measuring? We are measuring outputs. Right? So we are talking in terms of number of stories that we delivered in every sprint. Great, you delivered few stories, but is it usable? Is it valuable for your customer? Yeah. Otherwise, yes, you have written a lot of code, validated the code is good, but it's still inventory as long as the customers cannot use it, right? And the biggest problem that we have when we talk about measuring number of stories that are being delivered, I'm again saying it's not I'm not saying it's a bad metric. It's a good metric as long as this is something that you want to use in your retrospective, right? Developers want to reflect back and say, hey, we planned for 5 user stories, but we were able to deliver only 2. Now, why did we think we could deliver 5, and what was the reality because of which we couldn't deliver all the 5? Is a great retrospective conversations. But why is it being published to management, and why are managers interested in the velocity? And because of this wrong focus, what is happening, right? I'm not sure if you've heard of this 90-90 rule. No, this is traditional. We used to joke about it a very long time ago. We used to call it the 90-90 rule. What does that mean? Right? When a software task is 90% done, right? 90% of the task is done, and the final 10%, right, that is remaining, will take as much time to complete as the first 90%. Right? You ask the developer, I'm 90% done. The programmer, right? I'm 90%. coding it. Right? You give it to the tester, and then you say 10% is for defect fixes. How long does it take you to fix the defects? Almost as much time as the time the developer spent in building that particular. Right? The common pitfall of measuring tasks, right? Even today, I know teams which says we have using user story. And then what do? I break it down into tasks. What is a task? There is a UI coding task, there's an API coding task, and then there's a feature testing task, a security testing task. Now, the moment you break it down into functional tasks, right? When will the developer say he's done with the user story? As long as the coding tasks are done, the developer says I'm done. Right? Tester logs all the defects and you say I'm blocked. Okay, I'm done for it for now. Because unless it's fixed, I cannot move forward. So stop measuring outputs. Forget the task. Start measuring outcomes. Right? Does this feature work? Can we release it? Has the customer reviewed it? Can we release it to the customer? If yes, great. Now let's go focus on the next important. Right? And again, outcome does not really mean the final product. I'm not saying you have to build a product in every sprint, but at least a usable, valuable increment of the product should be built in each and every sprint. And based on, so in total, if the customer has given you, let's say 10 user stories to do it, and you thought you're going to take, let's say 5 sprints to deliver this 10 user stories, at the end of the first sprint, if you have delivered 2 user stories of the 10, what happens now? So what can you talk about the progress? We are 20% complete. And this is the actual completion. 2 out of the 10 requirements, which 2? The highest value 2 requirements or the user stories, we have implemented it already. So when I say I'm 20% done, I actually mean I'm 20% done. Traditionally, what do we follow? Oh, the requirements document are in place, 15% complete. Or design documents are in place, 30% complete. Number of lines of code written so far, 0. But we consider it as progress. And once you hit the testing phase, right? Ask anybody what's the progress. Nobody has any clue. Tester is saying, why is this code so bad? I'm struggling to install it. Only after installing can I run my test cases. So I don't know when we will be done. Ask the programmer, why are defects like this coming so late? Let them log all the defects. Then I'll tell you when we will be done. So what was the progress that we are measuring so far? Doesn't make sense, right? Forget all of these things. Think about your definition of done. Does your definition of done include regression testing? Does your definition of done include your compliance or any other regulatory items that you need to do in that case? No. Does it include your specialized testing needs? Does it include documentations? If not, where is the working software? You don't have a working software. You have a lot of code, maybe slightly tested code. That's all that you have. And you cannot measure your progress until and unless you are delivering usable, valuable increment of the product to the customers. You're not living up to this particular principle. The next one says, Agile processes promote sustainable development. And the sponsors, developers, and users should be able to maintain a constant pace indefinitely. So the first question that I have is, right? Who decides the estimation in your Scrum team? Right? I know the quick answer is the developers. We do planning poker, we use story points, and we do it. And once the developer has given the estimates, how many times does the Scrum Master or the product owner feel a need to challenge that? I have seen a lot of Scrum Masters who says, I want to challenge this thing because, I think this is too much of time. You're not estimating it correctly. My usual question to the Scrum Master is, how do you know? This is generally represented as sustainable pace is represented by marathon. So you have to think in terms of marathon. I'll just give you a related example, right? If the task at hand was to run 100 meters, and if you were to ask the subject matter expert, let's say you are a Scrum Master as a subject matter, let's say you are Usain Bolt. If I were to ask you how long does it take to run 100 meters, maybe 9.3 or 9.5 seconds that he takes. But who's running the 100 meters? I am running the 100 meters. Preet has to run 100 meters. Now, does that number 9.3 or 9.5 seconds has any relevance because Preet is running it? No. So maybe as a Scrum Master or as a lead or as a product owner, if you were doing it, maybe you can do it faster than me. But are you the one doing it? No. In which case, let me decide what is the sustainable pace. You can push me to do it in run 100 meters in 9.5 seconds. In reality, I need 60 seconds. You push me, right? Say, no, Preet, I don't care, but you do it. Then you'll say, being a good Scrum Master or a project manager, you'll say, I'll give you 20% buffer. Let's say 12 and a half seconds. But what is my current level of fitness? 60 seconds. You ask me to squeeze it into 12. I'll try my best. Now, I'll run it in about, say, 40 seconds because I gave it my all. At the end of it, Is the customer happy because the customer was promised 12 or maybe 15 seconds? Customer happy? No. Project manager, Scrum Master, product owner, whoever has been pushing you, are they happy? No, because they also wanted it in 15. Are you as an employee happy? No, because you are burning out, right? So the progress should be towards delivering valuable goal, not just about getting some work done, right? So please avoid burning people out. Rushing through development can only lead to burnouts and mistakes and poor quality software. This is the reason why we really need to understand the group of people or the teams that I have, this is our ability, this is our capability. Now, if you need to go faster, let's start talking about how. It's not by pushing people. It is by setting the environment and the support that they need. Remember the previous one, right? 2 principles back, right? We said that as leaders, we have to provide them with the right kind of environment and support that they need to go faster. Are we talking about that? Is that a conversation that we have? If not, we are not living up to this particular principles in place. Continuous attention to technical excellence and good design enhances agility. All of us agree to this, right? So what does it mean? Agile team should focus not only on feature development, but also on ensuring that they are delivering high quality products, right? So great, you have to, when you start thinking in terms of improving quality, how many of your teams actually talk about technical debts, right? How many of your teams are actually measuring the existing technical debt in your code base? And what are the strategies that have been put in place in terms of preventing its accumulation, right? How often do we measure it? How often do we clear our existing technical debt? So now, how many times do we have conversations saying that, hey, you know what? Because of this time constraint, I'm taking a shortcut. Basically, I'm incurring some technical debt. How many times is this technical debt getting entered as an item inside your product backlog that needs to be worked on in the near future? And so that the product owner also understands the importance and it is getting prioritized in one of your sprint work. How many of us teams are using things like, say, continuous integration, right? Or even things like, say, code navigation, right? You might have heard of GitLab's code intelligence, right? Which helps you to do static code analysis, right? Or there are tools like, say, Sonar Cube or add-ons for if you're using Bitbucket or any of those Git enabled stuff, right? If you're talking about those, you have a lot of add-on tools that you have, which will help you to detect and fix code issues, right? Much faster. You don't have to build it, deliver it, test it to figure out, right? These tools can actually help you to identify your technical debt, your cyclometric complexity of your code. All of these tools are available. How many of this is being used on a regular basis as part of your sprint deliverables, right? Do you have, as soon as, when a developer raises a check-in request, do you have any kind of automation that is running in the background to validate that you're putting in good quality code inside the code base? If not, right, you're just blindly checking in and then hoping that testing will figure out if something has broken. Sorry, there is no continuous attention to technical excellence or good design, right? Big challenge with many of the developers. This is the reason why over a period of time, the ability to deliver value is drastically decreasing and the quality is also decreasing. Why? Technical debt is not something that helps you to move fast in the longer run. It might help you to move fast now, but if you do not address it, it's going to slow you down drastically in the near future. Yeah. So are we thinking in terms of that? Yeah. Another principle which is generally confusing, right? Simplicity is essential. And how do we define simplicity? It's the art of maximizing the amount of work not done, right? I think we are all familiar with Pareto, right? The 80-20 rule. The concept is, you can usually get 80% of your intended results with just 20% of the work. In other words, doing the things that can have the most impact. Yeah. So one way of looking at simplicity is, your teams are prioritizing the most essential projects first, so that teams do not have to work on multiple projects together. And once you have identified the essential projects and then the teams are working on those projects, right? What are you looking at? You're ordering the requirements within that project also, so that the teams are working only on the highest value item at any point, right? So good. All of this thing sounds really great, right? But my next question is, right? how many of, let's say the testers and the programmers are working together. Programmers are writing code, the testers are writing the test cases. Testers finish writing the test cases, right? Test data, test infrastructure, everything is ready, but the coders are not done. The programmers are still writing. They're saying we're going to take another 2 days to finish the coding. What do we generally see the testers being asked to do? Go write test cases for some other user story or a backlog item. So what is the focus here? The focus here is on keeping people busy. Busy on what? Really doesn't matter. But if you were to keep things simple, right? What is another way of looking at it? Stop starting anything new till you finish everything that you have started, right? Don't focus on keeping people busy. Focus on, right, delivering the highest value as early as possible and not worrying about a lower priority item just yet. So the intention is, if you're done with the testing side, go ask the tester, hey, what else can we do to support you in these cases, right? Maybe support them by writing some unit test cases or automating the unit test cases. If you can't do that, execute the existing automated unit test cases on behalf of the testers. I don't know how, but based on your context, this is what we need to start focusing on. Don't worry about the low priority item till your highest priority items are delivered. So maximizing the work not done is your low priority items. Finish your high priority items and don't get stuck with low priority items when your high priority items are not completed. That's it. Best architectures, requirements, and design emerge from self-organizing teams, right? We all know about self-managing teams, right? Teams that have the autonomy to manage their work. They will determine what to do, who should do it, how to do it, how much to do it. These are all great, right? So now let me ask you a question, right? How is your daily Scrum? Right? The reason I ask is, in many of the organizations still today, the daily Scrum is conducted by the Scrum Master. Scrum Master walks in, asks 3 questions. What did you do yesterday? What are you planning to do today? And do you have any impediments or any challenges to do your work? Right? So when you're talking about this daily Scrum being conducted, is this self-managing or is this micromanaging? If the developer is forced to answer what they did yesterday, what they're planning to do today, and if they have any problems, is it self-managing or is it micromanaging? If that's what is happening, as a Scrum Master, you're making sure that the self-management is not going to be put in place. Intent of daily Scrum is what? For the teams who have committed to the sprint goal to figure out how they are progressing and what they need to do next. Is that what they are doing? If not, forget about requirements and design emerging. You don't even have a self-organizing. Build self-organizing teams when these kind of conversations starts is when they become capable of supporting and taking forward architecture requirements and design development. So the first question that we need to ask ourselves is, do we even have the self-organizing teams? Yeah. If not, that's the challenge that we need to focus on as Scrum Masters or change agents. The last one says, at regular intervals, the teams will reflect on how to become more effective, then tunes and adjusts its behavior accordingly. And how do we use Scrum today? We use Scrum Guide as a fixed document, and we need to be compliant with the Scrum Guide. When Scrum, Ken has been very clear and has been talking about Scrum is your starting point and not your destinations, right? So what does it mean? You start by implementing Scrum, and then you continuously evolve it into a practice or a process which is best suited for your team based on the team's current capability or the maturity. In Scrum, what is that mechanism? We have heard of retrospective, right? What went well, what didn't go well, and how can we improve? I've seen Scrum Masters Scrum draw 3 columns, ask these questions. Few of the people talk, few of the others don't even care about what is happening. Scrum Master in the end creates a Confluence page or an MOM and sends it out. And when do we come back to these action items? We generally don't. In the next sprint retrospective, we again come back and revisit all of these things. So where is that understanding how to become more effective and how are you tuning and adjusting the behaviors? No. So in the retrospective, are we talking about, hey, what went well in terms of people and interactions in the last sprint? What didn't go well in terms of people and interactions in the last sprint? No, based on these 2 answers, what went well and what didn't go well in terms of people and their interactions, can you come up with an idea about how can we improve people and interactions in your next sprint? Right? How did we apply Scrum or how did we apply the process? What went well in terms of process? What didn't go well in terms of process? Based on which, how do we improve the process in our next sprint? What went well in terms of development practices and the tools that we are using? what didn't go well, and how do you take it forward, right? How do you improve it in your next sprint? Are these the questions that we are talking about in the retrospectives? If not, we are not even living up to the expectation of the 12th Agile Principle. Yeah. So if you really look at it, it is not about the framework. It is not about, you could be doing Scrum, you could be doing Kanban, SAFe. It really doesn't matter what process or frameworks you're using, right? If you have not thought about the 12 principles of Agile, because it's all about telling you how to conduct things, right? If you have not understood this, if you have not applied it in your teams, I don't think it's a framework problem. It is not an Agile problem that you're running into. It's a lack of understanding of agility that we are running into, right? And now, can a Scrum Master, no, so can the teams do it? Is there a quick solution to it? Unfortunately, no, because 4 values and 12 principles is what helps you to become Agile. And you have, if you're using Scrum, you have a role called as Scrum Masters whose job was to help the teams understand and implement Scrum the right way so your teams and organization becomes Agile. But most of the Scrum Masters or the Agile coaches that I talk to, what do? Or we send out meeting invites, we book conference rooms, we even order food when the teams are working late. So where is Scrum or Agile capability in any of these things that you're doing in here? Right? You're just acting as a team level secretary and not a change agent. Right? So if you really need to overcome majority of the challenges, please do not seek outside, go back. Reflect back on how we have implemented the Agile principles. And if you have not applied it, that's your starting point. You don't need to worry about any other aspects because if this is the root cause of the team struggling is this. If you cannot fix this root cause, adding more processes, adding more reports, adding more monitoring is not going to help. It's just going to make it worse. Right? So this is the reason why, every time I talk to people, I'm telling, all conversation leads up to saying, how much aligned are you with the values and principles listed out in the Agile Manifesto? If not, let's fix the basics and then let's think about the others later. Yeah. So this is the focus that I really wanted us, saying that revisit the manifesto. Most of the problems are still in. With that, I'm going to conclude.
So, is there any questions that you want to ask? If yes, then you may put in the chat box or you may unmute it. Ask the questions.
I wouldn't worry about Scrum metrics, right? What I would think about is, why are we doing Scrum? I would want us to start from the basic question, why are we doing Scrum? Yeah. So, see, in the end, Scrum is just a framework which is helping you to become Agile in your way of working. Correct? So, if you need to become Agile in your way of working, Scrum is just taking you there. So, the first and foremost question that you will have to ask ourselves is, do we know why Agile is important for us? Right? So, I'll just bring up one of the other slides that I had for another conversation, but this is what it is, right? Do we even know why Agile is important to us, right? What are we trying to accomplish? What problem are we trying to improve? Are we improving our market share or market value, or are we trying to improve the organizational ability, right? So what is it that we are trying to solve? What business challenges are we trying to solve by doing Agile, right? You need to start from there. So this is, this slide that you're seeing is from a concept called as evidence-based management. So if you head over to scrum.org, this is again an offering from scrum.org. Go to the scrum.org website, search for evidence-based management. There's a beautiful guide, total of 14 pages, but in fact, the content is around 10 pages, right? Amazing content, which helps you to understand what agility means from a business perspective. So you start from where we are, what we need, what is the challenge that we are doing. And then you can always decide, you come up with a strategy because you know where you are, you know where you want to be, you can come up with a strategy. And then based on the strategy, you need to start defining your metrics. Like there are a lot of metrics. Like say, these are the 4 key value areas that we generally talk about. An organization might be interested in improving their current value. They might want to capitalize on the unrealized value. They might want to improve their ability to innovate. They might want to reduce the time to market. Right? These are the outcomes that you want by being Agile in your way of working, right? So there are explanations, right? If you just go to the evidence-based management guide, there are a lot of these things. So now based on, these are 4 high-level items, yeah? So you look at any of these things and then based on this, evidence-based management also gives you a few of those metrics. Like say, if you're interested in your time to market. If your idea of doing Agile is to improve your time to market, right? These could be few of the metrics that you can think about, right? What is the build and integration frequency? How often are we able to release, right? From the time that we believe we are done with the work, but no, till we actually get it ready for releasing, right? Is there a time gap in between, which is what we call as a release stabilization period, right? When something goes wrong, how long does it take to identify, detect an error and fix it, right? If you're not using all the tools that I was discussing earlier, this will be long, right? How much is your customer cycle? Or if you're thinking in terms of ability to innovate, right? What is your innovation rate, right? How does your defect trend look like, right? How much time are we actually spending on building the product and value and not just, and how much are you spending on business as usual, right? How much technical debt do we have, right? So there are a lot of these kind of matrices that you should use, right? But again, how do you decide which are the right metrics? Now, based on what business challenges are you trying to resolve by using Scrum or Kanban or whatever it is, right? So we generally talk about identify your business challenges, baseline where you are, come up with a strategy, and then based on the strategy, define the metrics and constantly measure those metrics, because those metrics will help you to create transparency. And once you have transparency, then you can have the right kind of conversation to decide how to inspect and adapt and move forward. So this is the idea here. How to make align the teams who come from different backgrounds about story points. What exactly is one or two to start with? So there's no hard and fast rule. One basically would mean that is the smallest amount of work that the teams have identified so far, right? So whatever you think is the least amount of work that we have ever done, that becomes one, right? Anything bigger than that becomes your two. Anything much bigger than that, maybe 3 times bigger than that becomes 3, right? 5 times bigger becomes 5, right? Not necessarily exact 5 times. So when you say a story point of 5, it basically means it is bigger than 3 and probably smaller than 8. So 5 is actually depicting a range between 3 and 8. And when you say 3, you're actually depicting a range between 2 and 5, right? So story points are not, the individual or a very specific thing. It's usually depicting a range, right? So the best way to do it would be get the teams together, let them reflect back on a work that they have already done, and use one of those stories as a baseline and then assign it the value. Right? They could even start by saying this is a small story, big story, and then you say this is a small story. What is the story point that we want to associate? Is it the smallest? They say no, not really the smallest, but close to the smallest. Then maybe you give it a 2, right? Or they say, oh, this is the smallest work that we have ever done. It's okay to make it a 1. If the company practice is to do the software test after all the development, can the project team claim to be executing Agile? No, the only claim that you can have is you're pretending to be Agile. You're 100% waterfall, but you're still pretending that you're doing Agile. That's the only claim that you have, right? Because if you're not building faster feedbacks, because testing after all the testing basically means delayed feedback loops. So you're not doing Agile at all. You're still doing waterfall. How do we balance between process and Agile? Like you mentioned, often the sprint turned into mini waterfall. So see, process and Agile, you do not have to think about it as 2 different things, right? Process, whatever you're following right now is not effective. That's the reason why you're moving to an Agile way of working, right? So I personally do not believe in, a hybrid approach, because waterfall is an amazing process when you're doing repeatable, predictable work. Say in your organization, you have a customer support, right? Maybe you have the customer support where you have people who pick up the call and help them out, right? Or things like that. That's where waterfall kind of a thing will be useful, right? Because you identify your standard operating procedure, then you focus on automating, right? If you have a call support, right, then you want to automate it so that you say press 1 for this, press 2 for this, press 3 for this, and for anything else, you might want to put a chat bot in place. Right? So those kind of work is where the waterfall kind of an approach is the best used. Yeah. But if you're doing software development, any kind of product development which has the digital aspects to it, you really have to start thinking in terms of Agile. Right? I'm not saying Scrum, it could be extreme programming, Kanban, it doesn't matter. So it can be done that way. But if you think, we want to start with where we are and then slowly and then continuously improve, thinking about Kanban might be a great approach, because you can apply Kanban on top of waterfall or Scrum or whatever approach it is there. So maybe you want to start thinking in terms of Kanban, which is again not a process. It is just a method. We call Agile as a method. Kanban as a method, because you can apply it on top of your existing thing. So that creates hyper visualization, hyper transparency, right? So you see a lot of things, then you can figure out where things are going wrong, and then you can constantly improve on that, right? So if you're already doing Scrum and you're doing mini waterfall, I would still say apply Kanban on top, right? Kanban on top of Scrum, so that you have hyper visibility. So you will know where the bottlenecks are, and then you can continuously start. Can you suggest a standard Scrum process for a starter? That's what we call as the Scrum guide, right? Where the bare minimal things that you need to do, because Scrum in itself is so lightweight, right? It's so lightweight that, right? You cannot remove anything from Scrum. The moment you remove anything from Scrum, Scrum stops becoming empirical in their approach, right? So Scrum is your starter, right? Scrum kind of helps you to jumpstart your Agile transformation by first focusing only on the teams, and then across the teams that we are working in, right? You start with the teams, and then you move on to the various departments and all of those things that you are. But apply Scrum, do not tailor Scrum at the beginning, because the moment you tailor Scrum, chances are you're accommodating your existing challenges that you have in your organization. Right? Apply Scrum, let the challenges come up. That's the transparency that we need. Once the transparency is created, as a Scrum Master or as an Agile coach, you get the right kind of stakeholders talking about it and coming up with solutions for it, right? Providing them with the right kind of environment and support is what you need to do as a change agent. Okay, I think the questions have all been answered.
So thank you so much, everyone, for joining, and hope to see you on the next webinar. Thank you so much, everyone. Take care.